On to our top story today, Hamid Koskun, 50, has been found guilty at Westminster Magistrates Court of a religiously aggravated public order offence after burning a Koran outside the Turkish consulate in London on February the 13th. And in the last few minutes, Mr Koskun has issued a statement saying his conviction was an assault on free speech and will deter others from exercising their democratic rights. Well, we can now speak with the social policy analyst, Dr. Rakib Hassan. Rakib, always a pleasure to have your say. Undeniably, you could say it was a foolhardy and perhaps stupid thing to do to burn a copy of the Koran. The Batley Grammar School teacher still in hiding years later, merely for showing a cartoon of the Prophet Muhammad. But today, the courts found it was illegal. It was racially aggravated as an offence. Is that the right thing to do? Does the Muslim faith deserve special protection? Or is this the back door to blasphemy laws in this country?
Well, Mike, it won't come as any surprise to you that I find the burning of the Quran, along with the promotion of derogatory cartoons of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, I find them to be grotesque acts. That's not a surprise, being a Muslim social conservative. But I think the issue here is that we're a country that has not had blasphemy laws since 2008. They were scrapped 17 years ago. And the issue with this ruling is that it could be perceived to be a revival of blasphemy laws. And I think that this is a fundamental problem from a freedom of expression perspective. I've often made the point that the freedom to dissent and indeed criticize and mock religion, these are cornerstones of liberal democracy. So I think that there will be people who will be very concerned by this ruling. But perhaps what this ruling really shows is that this is the reality of multicultural governance. This is the drawback of having a diverse society. So there'll be many people who may well welcome the ruling, but there'll be also people who won't welcome it at all, especially from a free speech perspective.
Rakib, do you reckon the government would have taken the same position if somebody had set fire to a copy of the Bible?
In my view, I think that it would be very interesting to see if it was a different holy book, what the ruling would have been. But I think that it's also a point to be made in terms of looking at attitudes across different religious groups when it comes to these freedom of expression issues. And that's a very difficult but much needed debate. Which needs to be had in the UK. I think that what many people will perceive this to be is a ruling which ultimately treats Islam differently to other religions which exist in modern Britain. And I think unhelpfully, I think this will reinforce the perception that Muslims are the beneficiaries of preferential treatment in the UK. And I also think, Moin, I've made this point before, that if you move into this kind of direction, I actually think this could risk increasing the burning of the Quran, because people feel, well, you're withdrawing my rights. And the reality is this is an act which actually doesn't happen very often in the UK at all. But say if you were to move towards banning it, then people might feel, well, I actually feel quite they might feel more rebellious. They might take kindly to that right being taken away. So I think some people who welcome this ruling, who don't want to see the Quran being burned, they should be careful for what they wish for, because this might be counterproductive.
Rakib, an extra plot twist to this story is that back in 2001, in his day job as a human rights barrister, a certain Sakir Starmer defended a client who set fire to the Stars and Stripes, burnt the American flag in protest outside a US airbase in Norfolk, saying flag denigration is a form of protest activity renowned the world over. And to show his support, he even wore a pair of Stars and Stripes underpants in court to show his support for her while sitting down for that hearing. So, again, it's like there's no way that would happen, for example, if somebody set fire to a flag, I don't know, of Pakistan or Palestine, is there?
Well, I think what's really interesting about this case, Martin, is that he's been found guilty of a racially aggravated public order offence. And I think that when you look at the law, as I've said before, we don't have blasphemy laws. They've been scrapped for some time now. And I think that when you look at those other cases, such as the case of burning the American flag. I think the issue here is that some people will say, well, this is a religious book. It means a lot to people. A lot of people will then say, well, the American flag means a lot to American citizens that live in the UK. So I think that what you run the risk here is opening a can of worms. And I think that the ultimate risk is that you reinforce views that a particular section of society are ultimately the beneficiaries of preferential treatment, and that ultimately undermines equality before the law, and also the idea that people are free to criticize religion in our modern society.
Dr. Rakib Hassan, once again, bang on the money. Thank you very much for joining us on the show today, and you mind how you go. Thank you.
Now, Hamit Koskan, 50 years old, has been found guilty at Westminster Magistrates Court of a religiously aggravated public order offence after burning a Koran outside the Turkish consulate in London on the 13th of February.
Yes, we've also just found out that the District Judge John McGarver has sentenced this man to a £240 fine with a statutory surcharge of £96. OK, well, shall we speak to Tom Slater, who's the editor of Spiked? Tom, thank you very much. Just looking at some of the reaction that's coming in already, National Secular Society saying that this signals a concerning capitulation to Islamic blasphemy codes. What's your assessment?
I mean, it's hard to put it better than that. I mean, if this conclusion had happened in Iran, I wouldn't have been surprised. The only difference is the severity of the punishment, to be perfectly frank. This is an outrage as far as freedom of speech is concerned. It's an outrage where true tolerance is concerned. And it's just so depressingly predictable. This isn't the only time this has happened before. There was a case actually within weeks of Hamit Koskan's protest where a gentleman in Manchester was arrested and then pled guilty for a very similar offence for setting fire to a Koran. There was also a case back in 2011 where a member of the English Defence League was prosecuted and found guilty for a similar offence for burning a Koran. But at the same time, that doesn't make this any better. We seem to have got it into our heads that to blaspheme against one of the world's largest religions is unsayable, racist, and right for you to face criminal consequences. That cannot be allowed in a liberal society, in my view.
I mean, it is extraordinary that this man burned a Koran, didn't hurt anyone, just made a statement with some paper, and then someone ran out and started attacking him.
Yeah.
I mean, in many ways, he's the victim here, and yet it's almost like a girl who's worn a short skirt on a night out and gets assaulted becomes the perpetrator rather than the victim. I mean, that's the analogy that jumps forward in my head here. It's like the judge here said, "You're asking for it, mate." Mm.
Oh no, absolutely. And the fact that he was put on trial, the fact that he has now been convicted, it's only feeding the narrative of that man who ran at him with a knife. Koskan also claims that he was accosted at home by two gentlemen who woke him up in the middle of the night armed with knives, threatening to kill him if he ever burned a Quran again. Every time that we clamp down on people for daring to blaspheme against Islam or the Quran or what have you, we say that those people have a point. They're just going about it in slightly the wrong way. So what message does this send as a society when we suggest that there are certain things you're just not allowed to say? And let's be honest, there's a free pass being given to one religion where others would be expected to put up with their views being criticised, blasphemed against and so on. It's a really terrifying precedent to set, and I'm just not surprised but still shocked that we've come to this point.
Yeah, and Tom, you say that I would just to reiterate, so a £240 fine, a surcharge of £96. OK, that sounds, not a lot in terms of punishment, but it's not necessarily about that, is it? It's the fact that it was seen as a crime and went to court to begin with. The Free Speech Union and the National Secular Society are saying that they intend to appeal this verdict and keep on appealing it until it's overturned. They may well take it to the European Court of Human Rights.
Absolutely. I mean, their support so far for this particular case has been typically exemplary. One can only hope that common sense actually, prevails in the end. I wouldn't put too much trust in the European Court of Human Rights, where protecting free expression is concerned. They haven't got a particularly good track record where these kind of blasphemy cases are concerned in any case. But it's important that we fight this, whether it's legally as well as just kind of morally in the court of public opinion, because this is only going to get worse. The more that you give succor to the idea that there are certain viewpoints, certain protests, certain forms of expression which are so heretical and outrageous that they should be clamped down upon, the more or you also give a green light, I think, to those kind of extrajudicial forms of anti-blasphemy activism, the sort that we saw almost meted out to this gentleman via a knife when the protest itself took place. So I'm glad that this is being appealed. I don't necessarily have the greatest faith that that will be a successful one, but it's something that all of us, whether we're on this particular case or just arguing over it in the court of public opinion, need to take much more seriously.
That's such a good point. Could embolden the mob in other ways. Thank you, Tom Slater, editor at Spiked magazine.
Isn't it interesting when those 4 people in Bristol tore down that statue of Edward Colston, the judge let them off because of protest and like your legitimate right to express grievance. Why isn't this man allowed to protest in the same way? Why isn't this legitimate grievance? And it's not even destroying someone else's property. It's his own blooming book.
I think
it's his own property.
Fear of the Islamist backlash, I think. But we're going to get some more reaction to the news that Hamid Koskan, 50 years old, was found guilty earlier at Westminster Magistrates Court for a religiously aggravated public order offence. That's after burning a Koran outside the Turkish consulate back in February.
Well, joining us now is the criminal barrister at Bedford Row Chambers, Diana Constantin. Sorry if I butchered your name there, Diana.
You did.
Anyway, this is going to be a case that worries a lot of people because some people will see this as, in effect, a blasphemy law.
Good afternoon to everyone. I think it's very important to distinguish between lawful free speech and the acts of religiously aggravated, the ones that we actually see, and he's been found guilty. Although his intention was to protest outside, as you said, the Turkish consulate, I think the CPS quite correctly decided to not punish the opinion and the freedom of speech, but rather the hatred that was displayed outside the Turkish consulate.
Should you not be allowed to hate a religion, a doctrine, a book? He wasn't shouting about Muslims. He was shouting about Islam, wasn't he?
But I believe also it is the act of burning the Quran which can cause harassment and distress. And of course, it was in a public space, which falls squarely within Section 4A of the Public Order Act 1986.
I suppose lots of things could cause distress. I mean, I'm sure if any sort of ideology is attacked, people hold ideologies very, very dearly, whether that's ethical veganism or Islam or communism. I mean, whatever flavour of ideology you want to pick. I mean, surely in a free society you should be able to criticise any of those different ideologies. People might feel deeply hurt that you have done so, but I mean, isn't that what we are in a free society?
Absolutely, that's free society whereby you can articulate yourself, you can express your views, you can express your views and your concerns, of course. But when it comes into actually demonstrating such an intention and your ideology around it, such as burning the Quran and causing distress and harassment, I think that falls within Section 4A. And the CPS, as I said, did correctly into bringing this case to differentiate between what we call the freedom of expression, but at the same time, what can cause harassment and distress.
Yeah, I'm just wondering whether the same would apply for someone who was burning the Bible, for example.
If it was burning the Bible, yes, I believe that will be the case, because that can cause, as I said, distress and harassment to others watching it. It wasn't in your house doing it; it was people watching you. And that's the essence of it. You do have the right to protest. You do have the right to articulate yourself. You do have the right to exercise criticism as to what your views are. But when you take it a step further, such as burning a holy book, whether it's the Bible, whether it's the Quran, then and as the CPS did, to bring the case before the court, and it was proven beyond reasonable doubt that he was guilty.
Are we attaching something special to the Quran? You mentioned it was a holy book. Does it matter that the book is holy? I mean, if I were to go over to, I don't know, a Harry Potter convention and burn The Prisoner of Azkaban, would that be just as bad?
That's a good question, actually. I don't know about that, but I guess when it comes into religion, which is something that a lot of people hold very close to the heart and dearly into, understanding the cosmotheory of this world, I think that should be respected, whether it is, as I said, the Holy Book or the Koran. So that has to do, of course, with your human right as to believe in what you want. So I think that was taken a step further, and that's why it was brought under Section 4A.
For him, it was a form of protest, wasn't it? For him, it was a form of protest because clearly he does not accept the teachings of the Quran. And surely that's fair play.
Absolutely, yes. But that wasn't a protest, simply. It was burning a book. It was a book that, for many people, whether it's in the UK or outside watching what happened, it means a lot of things. And whether it's the Bible or the Torah, then that is a form whereby it's not
That's
just...
sort of suggesting that everyone should view the Quran or whatever holy book it is in the same sort of esteem, which I feel like just cannot be the case in any type of secular liberal society. But I do take your point, very well made. Diana Constantin, criminal barrister at Bedford Row Chambers. Thank you very much indeed. So there you go. And I do know some of you do agree that actually burning books, religious books, should be a crime or should be some kind of public order offence. If everyone was just burning books all the time, it would be quite chaotic.
Yeah, but they wouldn't, would they? I mean, I think this just does show the big difference we have in speech in the UK versus the US. Yeah. Without a doubt, this would not be prosecutable in the United States, without a doubt.
Yeah.
And yet over here it is.
Because people take offence. Well, sorry.